All right, all right, all right, all right. Let's start talking about World War II in earnest. This video is about the Phony War, which is basically our next step after the opening movement and the declaration of the previous video. Our learning objectives is to understand the Phony War phase of World War II, analyze some of the strategies and tactics of this phase, and analyze the reasons for the outcomes in this. Before we get started, you kind of need your map of Europe in your mind, all right? Our principal actors here, we're going to be looking at Denmark, which is a little on the tiny side. We're going to be looking at Norway and Sweden, and we're going to be looking at Germany, but of course, except that's not a German accent, and we're going to be looking at the UK. So look at the map. Look at this area because this is where the Phony War is really going to be happening. Now, the Phony War, strategically, very important. Now, one of the reasons why it's called the Phony War is because even though war had been declared between Germany and France and Germany and Britain, there was no fighting between these two groups. So hence the Phony War. Now, what happens here is both sides are looking for secondary fronts. They're looking for places to fight each other that are kind of away from their home base. And basically, people had learned from what had happened in World War I. And they don't want a war of attrition, of grinding against each other for years, trying to wear each other out. There was this hope that it would be relatively fast, especially considering the issues that Britain and France had been experiencing up until this time. And for Germany, basically, one of the things that they're really looking for are bases, air bases for the Air Force, and places for the U-boats to access the Atlantic. So they want to make sure that they are not bound. They don't have a naval blockade because that was a successful tactic of the British during World War I, and that they have continual access to the Atlantic Ocean to be able to trade and attack, so on and so forth. So Norway has strategic importance to both groups. Again, keeping that map in mind, it has this idea of a secondary front, and then importantly, it has large quantities of Swedish iron ore. So the port of Narvik, I will show you a map at some point. The port of Narvik is the principal place where Swedish iron ore was exported because the Baltic Sea, periodically, it freezes during the winter. And so Germany is very, very important, dependent on this iron ore. So during the previous years, Germany had worked to become self-sufficient, but they had not been able to do so. And of course, iron is going to be important to the making of a lot of war material. As stated, during the winter, the Baltic Sea freezes over, and this would mean that Germany would be blocked in if they didn't have Norway to have access to the Atlantic. And basically, they had worked quite a bit to develop their Navy and their U-boats. And so this would mean, having control of Norway would mean that they would be able to effectively use their naval power against Britain. Now, Norway, as we talked about in the previous video, declared neutrality. And this is a good thing for both people in that Norway isn't joining in the war on the other side. However, Norway has a huge amount of coastline and very poor defenses. Therefore, it is possible for one or the other side to be able to get Norway to use against their opponent. So that is part of the strategic importance of Norway. The other thing is, as we stated before, you have access to the North Sea, which allows you to get into the Atlantic. Otherwise, especially for Germany, then that means that they would not, they would be blockaded. And of course, Britain wants to have this control in order for that they can blockade Germany. And this is as we said before, holes in the naval blockade. now, now, during the opening movement, Norway had declared neutrality and mobilized for protection. They wanted to try to keep both sides out of Norway, hence the whole neutrality part. Now, this neutrality thing, there are no good guys here. Norway's like, hey, y'all, this is a sovereign state. Y'all best stay out of my sovereignty, but, in Norwegian. But this was violated by both sides. So British ships were sunken in the territorial space of Norway, as was aircraft. And so basically, both sides are actually violating the sovereignty by fighting in Norway's territorial waters and airspace. Britain is all going to try to bully the Norwegian government, but kind of nice-like, for the services of the merchant navy. So the merchant navy is basically the ships that were commercially generally that are registered in that country. Norway at the time had one of the largest merchant navies in the world. Now, what often happens is the merchant navy during wartime is turned into service for the military. They don't fight, but they will be very much involved in moving supplies and moving soldiers to where they might need to be. Norway agrees to this, but they're like, my name is Bennett or something that's Norwegian, and I ain't in it. However, Sweden and Norway said, dude, hell to the no. We will not allow you to have troops in the country. So they're maintaining the sovereignty. They would lend them the ships and the crewmen, but they're maintaining the sovereignty and their neutrality. Britain is like, okay, I will not go inside your country, but I'm going to lay some mines in all of your coastal waters. This is to try to blow up the German. If you look at this map here, you have this, this is a map of Narvik. And so we have a lot of iron ore mined in Sweden. And from there, it is sent by train to Narvik. And then it is deployed from the Narvik harbor to places around the world. In April of 1940, Germany goes on the offensive, and Denmark and Norway are invaded. On April 9th, Germany lands troops at all of the major ports. These countries declared the neutrality, and they were taken by surprise. They are not prepared for a German invasion. They do not have the military. They don't have the people. Especially in the case of Norway, you have an extremely long border, and they are not able to repel the Germans, and they fall. Basically, within a week, Denmark is done, and within 2 weeks, Norway is done. So Germany now occupies Denmark and Norway, and they have their foothold into the North Sea, into the Atlantic, and iron for the war effort. And this basically means that Britain is not going to be able to blockade Germany, and the fighting will continue. The British did not have sufficient air support, therefore they weren't able to actually help Norway. So the British said, hey, dude, we got your back. There's a lot of this happening, a lot of, I got your back, and a lot of, I guess I didn't. And this fall of Norway is the last blow for Chamberlain's government. Essentially, people see that Chamberlain has messed up in so many instances, that appeasement, the Munich Agreement, that they failed in Poland, they failed for Denmark, they failed in Norway. This is the last blow for Chamberlain's government, and it is done for. And this is when you have Churchill becoming the prime minister. The Allies are forced to withdraw from Denmark and Norway, and basically, because these countries have fallen, the last step, or the last place where they feel like they can potentially repel Germany, is in France. So they give up on that and they get ready for France. And so you can see here from this map, this is the map April 9th of the German operations. And you can see here, it was basically almost simultaneous deployment, or rather arrival at these borders, at these ports, to take over. And the Denmark and Norway are not really able to. In June of 1940, the Norwegian mainland forces capitulate to the Germans, and there's an agreement. And Germany now occupies Norway. So Germany won in terms of meeting their overall strategic goals, right? However, it isn't all a plus. The resistance in Norway continues, and this is a problem for Germany during the entirety of the war and the entirety of the occupation. With that resistance from the Norwegian population, that means that Germany continually needs troops to be stationed there in order to keep control. And that ultimately means they can't deploy those troops to fight in other battles on other fronts. Additionally, yes, Germany got Norway. However, they lost half of their destroyers. They only had 2 heavy cruisers, and they lose half of those. I know my math is real good. That is, they lost 1. And this ultimately weakens the German Navy, and it is going to be less effective during the battle for Britain. Now, keep in mind, yes, Hitler had embarked on a massive growth and development of the Navy, but they still did not really compare to the largest Navy in the world of a traditionally maritime power. Destroyed the port of Narvik. And Germany got what they wanted, but the port was out of commission for 6 months, which means that for 6 months, the iron ore that needed to go into the German home front in order to produce war material for Germany wasn't there. However, here's a plus. Germany, okay, there's a reason why there's a plus, y'all. Imagine the world. Now remember, the world is round. I know. It's shocking. The world is round. And what that means, though, is by having access to Norway, it places them in a really good proximity to the Soviet Union. And this means that they'll have airfields in place to be able to invade the Soviet Union, as well as fight in the North Atlantic. Here's a minus. 85% of the Norwegian merchant marine actually went to Britain. And so, again, remember what a merchant marine does. And this means this is a minus for Germany and a plus for the British. The Norwegian government also doesn't capitulate. The Norwegian government goes in exile in Britain, in Scotland. And there, the naval ships that were able to get away from Norway or had been being deployed, as well as a lot of the Air Force, they were able to go to Britain, and the Norwegian government in exile reconstitutes their Navy and their Air Force, and they continue to fight in the Atlantic and the European air battles. We sometimes forget that there were other people fighting, but all of these governments that did not join on the side of continue to. And so here we have a picture of the German infantry attacking through a burning Norwegian village. Keep in mind that Norway has a very small population even today, and you have a population that was completely unprepared for this. And these blitzkrieg tactics were fast, they hit hard, and people weren't ready. So, yeah, Norway. And here we have an image of German troops entering Oslo in May 1940. And so you have the Gestapo is going to establish itself in Norway because of the resistance and the need to keep an eye out and to maintain the occupation. Which brings us to El Surprise. Here you go. What do you call fake spaghetti? Now keep in mind, this is in keeping with our whole thing about the Phony War. Do you get it? Do you get it? An imposter! You're welcome.